Power steering pulleys are tricky to get off sometimes at the best of times. However, if you live where I do in Northern Ontario, where we dump salt on the road like unbelievable, so it's like a snowstorm when the salt's dry, it rots everything on our vehicles very quickly. And power steering pulleys are no exception, so it rusted considerably. Now you have to clean up, before you try and remove it, you have to clean up this groove. I'll show you what I used. These two files, this is just an axe file. This is a small square file with the edges that are abrasive. So basically you have to get in there. I tapped it with a hammer and screwdriver to remove the bulk of the rust. And then you have to work at it, but you have to, all the way around, turning your pulley as you're going and clean that groove up so that there's something to grab, because the rust alone won't let you grab that. The rust will almost be equal to the size of the outside flange. So once you have that cleaned up, you can use your puller to get it off, but there is a trick, or you will strip this end. This flange is now smaller than what pullers and factory equipment is designed for. Due to the rust, it is also rusted, so it is no longer as big as it was when it was put on the truck 17 years ago. So I'm going to grab the pieces of the assembly and I'll start putting it on. If you haven't seen the power steering puller, this is what it looks like. It's these four pieces. What I did, and I'm going to show you this in detail when it goes on, you can see that that's shiny. The flange that goes on the inside of these grabbers, I had to shrink it down. I just used a flap disc and a sander and shrunk it down a few thousandths, because when that was in place, the large end of the puller, being this, prevented this clamp from closing tight, and it would sit something like this. With the rusted and worn out flange, I needed it to clamp tightly to hold it because it has shrunk. So I just had to clean this up a little bit so it didn't prevent these clamshells from closing any tighter. So I'm going to put it on here and then I'll show you what I did. So these pieces are now on. This is the puller getting in place, and these are the clamps that will hold that flange. However, you can see the gap, and that gap is significant given the flange has shrunk due to rust. So when you start to do it, if you try and pull it like this, you're going to see, you'll start taking it off and your puller is going to start to tilt because you're stripping the flange off on one side or the other. It has to be pulling straight. And the only way you're going to get this off is if it's tight onto that shrunken flange. So what I did is I cut these small pieces of aluminum and I used them as shims. So I put them on the side here. I use 1, 2, and then actually a third one to shim this in. I'm trying to do this with one hand, so I'll try and get this in. So shrinking this in with these shims, and I tap them all the way in so they're in place. So I've actually put the puller in place as it will be, and you can see now how much play there is in there without my shims. That can open up an awful lot, and that will strip your pulley if you don't put the shims in. So now I'll throw the shims in. So this is now exactly as you would pull it out with the shims. So I put the two shims in. They have to be on the sides, not here. They have to be on the sides to push those two halves together. And I put the two in, then I opened up a little split in them, and then just tap the third one in with a hammer, actually. Okay, so once that's tapped in, there is pressure holding that clamp in place, and it's not going to let go. As you tighten, there's constant pressure. You can then pull it out without a problem. If you don't do this, and you just use it as factory, the way the clamp comes, and you have a very rusted pulley, like I say, you're going to see it start to strip, and you'll be able to tell when it's stripping because this vertical puller will start to tilt on the front, and that means you're pulling one side over top of the flange and bending the flange. Anyway, this works, and it'll work every time as long as you take your time, clean up the pulley, and then do as I've shown you. It will work. Okay, hope that helps somebody.